Creatures of the night, it's your girl Tati. Let's talk about the final part of Who Killed WCW. Now, for this episode, I kept thinking, damn, like I really wish there was a lot of people who weren't on this would actually have been on this. I would have loved to hear from, well, I don't want to say love, but hearing from Hulk Hogan would have been interesting. I know that motherfucker would have been lying through his teeth. So that would have been something entertaining, if anything. It would have been cool to hear like from Sting, Shivani, Arn Anderson, a lot of other people who obviously wasn't there. And then I thought about it because a huge focus on this episode tonight was the business aspect of things, like, AOL and Time Warner merging and how that affected WCW. And it also made me think, like, what if Ted Turner, who's still with us, he's 85 years old, what if he was on this talking about things? And that would have been interesting. But then again, he's 85 years old and we still want him to be in the land of the living with us. Then we probably shouldn't bother him with this foolishness. But it would have been interesting to hear his side of things and what, transpired in terms of through his eyes, instead of some of these people that I honestly didn't want to hear from, like Eric Bischoff and Vince Russo. Now, for this episode, like I said, a huge focus on it was like the business aspect of things. In the year 2000, AOL and Time Warner ends up merging. However, AOL gets 55% of the company, while Time Warner gets 45%. And this is a huge thing because this takes away a lot of power. This pretty much take all the power away from Ted Turner at this point. Now, I don't know why they thought this was a good idea. Obviously, Ted is getting older and whatnot, and maybe he didn't want to have so much power, but I don't think he realized that he was going to have zero power in, the business. Now, what ends up happening is that he's like pretty much demoted to being vice president, but that does absolutely nothing for him. And people were saying prior to this, merger, that AOL, despite like the internet being a huge thing, and look at it now, 2024, it's a huge thing. We practically can't live without it. It just wasn't a sure thing to really get into. So people were just like, we see all the cracks into this. Y'all probably should not buy into it. However, they end up merging anyway. And it did turn out to be a poor investment for them in the long run. Now, while that's going on, we do have WCW who's doing much worse. Now, in comparison, they tell us the numbers for WCW Uncensored pay-per-view in 1999. They ended up having over 360,000 people watching the show. Now, fast forward to 2000, they got 65,000 motherfuckers watching it. And I know you're probably thinking, well, 65,000, that's not bad. You lost 300,000 people who watched the year previous, and now you did so much more worse. Now, obviously, when it comes to business, they're looking at the numbers, and especially at the point where they are with this merger and they're not doing well. Their goal is to be doing better than the year before if they want to keep, WCW going. WCW at that point in the year 2000 had lost $65 million. And Eric Bischoff is really, really worried. He goes over to Brad Seagull and he's just like, bitch, we got to sell WCW, but he still wants to be part of it. Now, Brad looks at him and he goes, whoa, homie, we don't sell things, we buy things. And it's interesting that he said that because what it was, it's not necessarily that they didn't want to sell WCW. I think what this was them looking at the company's reputation in terms of, if we're selling, then it looks like we have a problem rather than us buying. When you buy, it looks like you got money, it looks like you got a plan, and then people can, feel confident in the company. So when they're selling something away, then it looks bad for the company. So in that case, I understand what he was saying, but it would have been a great idea for them to have sold the company. Now, obviously, the company, they have merged. And then there's like little things here that is showing Eric Bischoff this is going to be a problem. People in the company are feeling not so confident about what's going on. And to make matters worse, while we do have Ted Turner, who's now vice president, we do get a new president. And I'll get to him in a second. But now we're at the point where Eric Bischoff gets a phone call and he's being told that, hey, I know some people who are going to put the money, who are sports fans, who are wrestling fans that would like to buy the company and want to work with you. And they wanted to buy with Fusion Media WCW for $67 million, which would have been a great thing. And then part of that deal was then for them to still stay on, Warner's, and they will still be on Monday nights and still be on Thursday nights. So same time slot and everything. Like it's like just new people running the circus pretty much, but it's still on at the same time, same place. So people can still, get into it, and they'll just have new people running things, and it could be better than what it was before. Now, here's the thing. We get a new president. His name is Jamie Kellen. He comes in on there, and then he goes, I hate pro wrestling. We're going to put WCW on hiatus. Now, that's what he said at first. And then after a while, he changed his mind. He said, get rid of this shit. Nobody watch wrestling anymore. I don't like wrestling. I don't want to have anything to do with it. I'm washing my hands off this. Now, obviously, this is a bad thing for the company. However, Eric Bischoff still has high hopes because there are people who are interested. They're making plans. They're looking at venues and places that they can have the show pretty much starting over, but kind of not starting over. They just wanted to start over because obviously management and all that stuff that they had going on was shit. Now they have new people that they think that they was going to bring the company to new heights. And they even said that they were planning on doing even better than WWF during that time. Probably could have happened. Who knows? Now, out of the blue, here we have Eric Bischoff gets a phone call. And the first thing he hears is from one of the guys from Fusion Media. He says, it's over. It's done. And then Eric Bischoff is just like, oh, okay, shit, we got it. We got the deal. Like, what was going on? And he goes like, no, like, it's really over. Like, we have nothing left. We can't buy the company. It's a done deal here. We got to move on. Now, Eric Bischoff is shocked and surprised. And he's just like, well, what happened? Like, what happened with our deal? We thought that they had something really concrete. And unfortunately, that doesn't end up happening. Now, got to take you back a little bit, where we have Stu Snyder, who works for WWF. He's the president. Now, he's been watching from God knows where, okay? And he's been assessing things from God knows where. Obviously, according to people on the show, they feel like they have people who were planted into the situation to be able to tell Stu everything that's going on financially or any talks with WCW in terms of them selling. And he is watching things from afar, and because he got his little birdies in his mouth telling him things, what's going on. And then he ends up going to Vince McMahon and say, hey, you know what? The time is now. It's now or never. We're going to buy this shit. They end up buying the company for $4.3 million. Yes, I said that right. Not billion, million, 4.3, which is absolutely freaking horrible. Now, I know what you're going to say. They had Fusion Media, who had $67 million on the table for WCW. And the thing is that the company itself, Turner themselves felt like that it wasn't even worth that much. They could have made more money. But the reason why they didn't want to take it is because if they took more money for it, then it will still be under, Warner, and they just didn't want to have nothing to do with it. So it was just like, all right, basically, I want to take it for a couple of pennies. We'll give it to him. They give it to him for the price. And obviously, no one within the business, in terms of like the wrestlers, knew about this. And they just, was uncertain about what was going to happen. So now, fast forward to, we have March 26, 2021, the last episode. And then Vince McMahon turns up on WCW Nitro. Everybody, all wrestling fans are just like, what the fuck is it? I actually remember that, to be honest. And people were just like, well, what is he doing here? And then to make matters worse, earlier that day, the wrestlers, they're getting ready for the show. And they're actually showing these never seen before footage throughout that last day, where even Shane McMahon comes out there, and then people are just like, well, what's going on? And then they show Dustin Rhodes looking at, the plans for the show. And then he sees Vince McMahon has a segment. He's like, Vince McMahon here on WCW? What the fuck? Now he's feeling worried. People are panicking. They don't understand what's going on here. Now, you would think, okay, WWF wants to buy the company. Sure. Now, WWF, they already have their established company. They got their peoples and everything like that. So now you buy this company, and what do? You can just scrap it and send everybody home or whatever. Or you end up taking some people and taking them with you. And that's exactly what they did. They obviously picked some people, well, mostly wrestlers. A lot of these wrestlers were still under contract, And for those who wanted to go over to wrestle on, WWF, they end up taking deals where they went to, had to buy out, half of their contract. So now it's just like, okay, well, I was going to get this amount. Now I'm going to get half just so I can go over to WWF. And that's what they did. Like Booker T ended up taking that deal. And obviously that ended up working out for him. Can't say the same for other people. Now, that last episode, Booker T, he ends up winning the title. And then he goes like, for him, he took the opportunity as an audition, as a moment, so that WWF could be watching this and being like, we want Booker T to come on over to WWF and be part of the roster. And like I said, that worked out for him, not so many other people. Now, Kevin Nash is just like, I don't understand why people even showed up that last day of work. It just didn't really make sense. He felt like, everything had went down to shit. Why be there to be when the ship sinks on that very last day? And I guess that makes sense. I get what he's saying, but I would have loved to see how things would have turned out anyway. It was really, really interesting. That last day, people are obviously feeling concerned. They go out there and they do their jobs, but after the show is over, they're wondering, well, what's going to happen? And unfortunately, majority of people lost their jobs. That's including the wrestlers, cameramen, some of the referees, people who had these, roles backstage that you never even hear of. Most of those people are absolutely gone. And unfortunately, that's just how it is, because WWF already had their people and already had the way their ship ran, and they didn't need to have all those people. If anything, this was a very, very small price for them to pay, $4.3 million, just so that they can acquire, obviously WCW's whole fucking library, and then, a few wrestlers. Let's just be honest, a few wrestlers, because there wasn't a lot. And was it a great deal for them? Yes, and then kind of no. So a lot of people within the company said that they felt like Brad Seagull had something to do with WWF getting the company. And part of that is because he was really good friend with Stu Snyder, who worked with WWF. So pretty much was also being a little birdie to help him, know when the time was right for them to especially get WCW for a low cost like that. If anything, they probably was willing to give that shit for free if they didn't want to get some type of monetary gain for it. And a lot of people kept pointing figures in terms of, who could have been, that person, that little informant for WWF in order for them to buy. Now, they do end up showing, what it was for, like, very briefly. They obviously had the invasion storyline. And to be honest, when I was a kid, I thought that invasion storyline was just on and popping. But then when you really look back at it, it's just like, oh, shit. There was a lot of issues here. There was a lot of things here that could have been so much better. And unfortunately, that didn't work. And then a lot of these wrestlers on the show are also saying, too, that, they had a really great storyline. But if you really look back at it, it didn't really play out in the best possible way. And then Kevin Nash made a really good point here, is that even though they bought the company and they had some of these wrestlers from WCW come over, it was still them putting their guys over no matter what. And he goes on to say that Scott Hall, at that point, by the time he came to WWF, he was sober for 11 months. And then he got so unhappy with being in WWF that he ends up going back to drinking heavily again, because he was so unhappy with how things worked out. And a lot of wrestlers didn't feel like, they came on over and they didn't feel like they were part of the WWF. It was still like there was like some type of animosity with them being the WCW guys. And that's pretty much all they said about that. And I thought that was really surprising. I felt like they could have gone more in depth about it. Booker T being one of those guys who I feel like benefit from, obviously that them buying the company, has nothing but nice things to say about WWE. So, asking him, it's like, okay, it's great to hear his opinions, but you kind of want to hear other people's opinions, because look at him. He still works for the company. He's going to say positive things regardless. And I don't think it's been peaches and roses the whole way through. Even for Booker T, I don't think so either. But this episode ends up asked that question, well, who killed WCW? Everybody on the show is saying something different. And really the real answer is it's a combination of things. We can't just point fingers at Eric Bischoff, Vince Russo, Hulk Hogan. I mean, I feel like they're the main culprits in terms of individual people in this whole thing. But I think it's a little bit of everything that played a role here. Obviously, a lot of people at the end were saying that it had something to do with the merger. And I'm just saying there were problems before that, problems way before that got to even after the merger. They're seeing like this company probably not worth having. Why would they see that the company's not worth having? Because of all the problems that occurred prior to that even happening. So for me, I personally feel like we have to look a little bit further, and that is, a lot of individual people being in the company. And like I said, Eric Bischoff, Vince Russo, Hulk Hogan being one of them. A lot of poor business decisions were made. And us as fans growing up watching, like I absolutely loved WCW, and sometimes I did prefer it over WWF. And the interesting thing here is that they had the fans, they had people. Like we said, for 83 weeks, they were doing so much better than WWF, especially in ratings. However, there were still problems that us fans can't see. And even till this day, when it comes to pro wrestling, we have all these promotions from all over the world, and it's so easily accessible for us to watch. Like, we can enjoy the show, or probably kind of enjoy the show, but we don't know what problems that they really have. Like, a lot of people say all these positive things about WWE, but if you're going to tell me that everybody over there is happy right now, that's a lie. Same thing with AEW, same thing with New Japan. Like, no matter where you go, there are some type of issues, even when you see them being as professional as possible on TV. And it really, really played a huge thing when you look back at WCW to see how the backstage politics and everything played a huge role on TV. And us just being younger during that time and not knowing too much about the business, we just didn't see all of the big problems right in front of us. And we kind of took it for entertainment. And that obviously... that resulted to the demise of WCW. So like I said, it's a whole bunch of people to point fingers here at. And what really, I don't want to say disappoint me because I'm not surprised. It's just that while people are still just like pointing fingers at different things, nobody was saying, I played a role into why WCW was, ultimately came to its demise. Vince Russo didn't say that. Eric Bischoff didn't say that. Nobody said that. Nobody took accountability for themselves in this situation. This was like 23 years ago. And people are still not saying, yeah, I did this and this was an issue and this is part of the reason why, WCW went under. And that doesn't surprise me, but I'm just like, hey, we grown. We could admit our faults here, right? Or probably not. Guys, I think this was a really great series. I would love to see more series like this when it comes to pro wrestling. I can't really think of any specific topics right now. I know Dark Side of the Ring do cover a lot of individual topics and people. And there are some things that I feel like they can go more in depth of when it comes to these topics. So I don't know what else they'll do in the future in terms of pro wrestling. But me being a huge fan of pro wrestling, I really do appreciate being able to have extra content like this on national TV talking about pro wrestling. It really does make me feel like, pro wrestling is alive and well for the most part. Guys, thanks so much for watching my review. Yeah, we don't have any more episodes, but subscribe and hear me talk about other things in terms of pro wrestling. I'll see you guys then. Bye.